Hello everyone, you're watching Awaz News. I'm Kubra Ali and I'll be taking you through big news across Canada.
Police charged 5 people with allegedly defrauding Ontario COVID-19 relief programs. Some Toronto grocery stores have cut beer and wine sales due to theft small margins. Food delivery driver attacked during carjacking in Mississauga dies in hospital, police. Privacy Act allows disclosure for inmate transfers. Mendocino said it restricts them. Driver taken to hospital after vehicle enters pond in Mississauga. Toronto entrepreneur pledges $20,000 to house refugees stuck on city streets. Group calls for the head of Toronto's shelter system to resign amid refugee crisis.
Those were the headlines, and now let's jump right into the details.
Police are investigating after a single vehicle was seen entering a pond in Mississauga late Monday morning. The collision happened in the area of 280 Hillcrest Avenue at Clay Hill Road, which is north of Dundas Street West and east of Mavis Road. In a follow-up tweet, Peel Regional Police said that male has been transported to a local hospital by ambulance and that there were no other occupants in the vehicle. Constable Donna Carlson told Awaz News that a call came in shortly after 11:30 a.m. for reports of suspicious circumstance. She said that 7 or 8 officers attended the scene along with members of Mississauga Fire and Emergency Service. The Marine unit has also been called in. Drivers are being urged to take alternate routes. Soon after Canadians were told privacy law was preventing them from learning why notorious serial killer Paul Bernardo was moved to a medium security prison, the federal privacy watchdog was reminded behind the scenes that there are ways around it. Bernardo has spent nearly 30 years in maximum security prison, most recently the Millhaven Institution near Kingston, Ontario, before news broke that he had been transferred to La Macasa Institution in Quebec, a medium security prison offering treatment for sex offenders at the end of May. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendocino, who's handling all the prison transfer, has dogged him for weeks, has said that the Correctional Service of Canada, which was responsible for the decision, owes Canadians an explanation given the severity of Bernardo's crimes. But he also said the Privacy Act was getting in the way of transparency. The Privacy Act and other legislation currently put significant limits on what can be discussed publicly, including information surrounding specific inmate transfers, Mendocino said in a statement on June 14. He added he wanted Philip Dufresne, the Federal Privacy Commissioner, to propose new procedures about sharing information with the public and victims in high-profile cases. Newly released emails show that got the attention of Dufresne's office. Bernardo's survey an indeterminate life sentence for kidnapping, assault and murders of 15-year-old Kristen French and 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey in the early 1990s near St. Catharines, Ontario. He also convicted of manslaughter in the death of Tammy Homolka, the 15-year-old sister of his then-wife Carla Homolka, who was released after completing a 12-year sentence of her role in the crimes against French and Mojave. The day after Mendocino blamed privacy legislation for restricting what could be shared with Canadians, Dufresne was provided with notes prepared for him by his staff ahead of meeting with Catherine Luo, the Chief Information Officer of Canada. They had been scheduled to discuss privacy-related matters. Mendocino's comment was listed among topics to discuss. The Privacy Act currently allows federal government institutions to disclose personal information to the public interest and says that such decisions must be made by the head of an institution on a case-by-case basis, the staffer wrote. The Canadian press obtained the heavily redacted email through the Access of Information Act. In a statement late Sunday, Mendocino's office defended his position that legislation puts significant limits on a government's ability to share personal information, emphasizing how the law expressly says it must keep such matters private without consent of the person involved. It went on to say that in the case of Bernardo, only federal corrections has the power to apply discretion. A Toronto entrepreneur has personally pledged to donate at least $20,000 to house refugees who have been camped out in downtown Toronto for weeks. They don't need a handout, they need a hand up. Those people are exactly like I came here and a lot of us came here, and we need to step up for them and show them that we can do better, Paramount Fine Foods founder Mohammed Faqih told Awaz News on Monday morning. He said advocates and volunteers are working to find a place for these refugees to live, and once they secure space, he will personally foot the bill. Al-Faqih encourages all levels of government to move faster on the issue that's been described as crisis in the interim. He is asking other private citizens to pitch in what they can. His philanthropy is aimed at bridging a gap that's resulted from a stalemate between the city and the federal government, leaving dozens of refugees caught in the middle. For weeks, about 30 or so people have slept outside of shelter intake center on Peter Street ever since the city started referring refugees to federal programs in June. They camp outside the intake with the hope that an extra shelter spot will open up, but few do. According to City, Toronto hasn't received any new funding for refugee shelter spaces since last year, when the federal government provided money to cover the cost of asylum seekers who accessed Toronto's shelter system in 2022. Meanwhile, there was a 440% increase in refugee claimants in May compared to September 2021. Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow released a statement on Friday after meeting with all levels of government, calling it productive and focused, with all parties agreeing to return to table with concrete actions on Tuesday. A trip to a grocery store in Toronto for your favorite wine or beer could leave you empty-handed. That's because a handful of grocers in the city have quietly stopped selling alcohol due to rising levels of theft and razor-thin margins. It's really becoming unmanageable and getting out of hand, and so some grocers have taken the decision to remove these products from their shelves, Retail Council of Canada spokesperson Michelle Wasselishin told Awaz News. Since 2015, grocers across Ontario have been able to sell wine and beer in their stores under the Master Framework Agreement signed by the previous Liberal government. The 10-year deal with foreign-owned beer store limits the margins grocery stores can make on sale of wine and beer. Eligible large and small-sized retailers applied to sell the products, but had to keep their margins between 2 and 6.99%. According to Wasselishin, the average margin on beer and wine sales for large grocers represented by the Retail Council of Canada in Ontario is 2.2%. Although the exact number of stores that have gone dry remains unclear, Wasselishin said the decision by grocers to do so was not made lightly. As the sun sets on the Master Framework Agreement, Ontario Premier Doug Ford suggested in May he will make good on his 2018 campaign promise to bring booze to convenience stores. Since then, the province has been quietly consulting with stakeholders, including the Ontario Convenience Stores Association, on how best to make the pledge a reality. More than 20 community advocates are calling for head of Toronto's shelter system to step down amid a worsening crisis involving refugees camped out on downtown sidewalk with nowhere to go. In an open letter released Monday, the group accused Gord Tanner, the general manager of Shelter Support and Housing Administration (SSHA), of repeated mismanagement of the shelter system. About 30 refugees have been regularly sleeping on the sidewalk outside of the intake center at Richmond and Peter Streets for weeks since the city started referring refugees to federal programs rather than admitting them to the municipal shelter system in June. The city claims there were 2,900 refugee claimants in Toronto's shelter system in May. According to the city, that's an increase of 440% compared to September 2021, when there were just 537. The group said that when compared to 2018 data, the uptick in refugee claimants in May represents only an 11% increase. The letter noted that the city is telling refugees seeking shelter to call Service Canada, a move advocates call a cruel, wild goose chase. In the letter, the group demands the Tanner step down immediately. Beyond the current refugee crisis, the group accused Tanner of decreasing transparency in the shelter system by changing how often shelter deaths are reported from monthly to every 6 months. The group also said Tanner endangered the lives of unhoused people during the COVID-19 pandemic when he approved pushing together shelter beds to create more space. The city has accused the federal government of not providing enough money to house refugees, which is federal responsibility. City staff said $100 million more in federal funding is needed to keep up with demand. Since then, refugees have camped outside the intake center, hoping that an extra spot may open up, though few do. They have been forced to endure inclement weather, sleeping outside in the rain while they struggle to access facilities to clean themselves, often relying on frontline services and Good Samaritans for food and clothing. On Monday, Paramount Fine Foods founder Mohammed Faki pledged to donate at least $20,000 to house refugees in Toronto. In a statement, Paul Johnson, Toronto city manager, said he has every confidence in Tanner. A 24-year-old food delivery driver who was the victim of violent carjacking in Mississauga earlier this month has died from his injuries, Peel police said. In a news release issued Monday, the police service confirmed that the victim, identified by investigators as Brampton resident Gurvinder Nath, died in hospital last week. The carjacking occurred in the area of Britannia and Prairie Roads at around 2:10 a.m. on July 9. Police said that Nath was called to an address in the area for a delivery, and when he arrived, he was confronted by unknown suspects who attempted to steal his vehicle. A physical altercation ensued and the suspects fled the scene in the victim's car, leaving Nath at the side of the road with life-threatening injuries. He was rushed to a trauma center for treatment but died on July 14. Police have charged 5 people who allegedly used fictitious or ineligible business to apply for funding through Ontario government COVID-19 relief programs. Police say that the applications were initially flagged as suspicious by officials within Ontario's Ministry of Finance, who then contacted the OPP's Serious Fraud Office to begin an investigation. In a news release issued on Monday, police said that the suspects attempted to exploit several programs meant for small business, including the Ontario Small Business Support Grant, the Property Tax Program, and the Energy Cost Rebate Program. Police say that 4 Ajax residents and 1 Ottawa resident are all facing multiple charges in connection with the investigation, including fraud over $5,000. Police say that the Ottawa suspect, 50-year-old Ken Lee, was previously released from custody and has failed to attend court on multiple scheduled appearance dates. A warrant has been issued for his arrest. The other 4 suspects are due in court on August 10th.
Thank you for tuning in. I'm Kubra Ali. I'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same channel. Have a good night.